Hey, what's up? Silas here. I'm back again. It's the second time we're recording today, and we're reading The Secret History of the Shadow Campaign that saved the 2020 election. So, Stephen, say what's up to everyone and tell us a bit about why we're reading this.
Hello, everyone. So this article came across my sites recently from Time Magazine. Basically, it talked about how a certain wealthy, powerful group of people intervene on behalf of Joe Biden in the 2020 election in the name of saving democracy. And yeah, it's one of these things that we've sort of wondered to ourselves what goes on behind the scenes. But Time Magazine decided to actually come out and write an article about it. And they're walking through explaining the who, the what, the where. The last section we read was one of the main people who led it, and then this next section it's going to get into the various alliances between groups who were doing it. So it's pretty interesting because, again, like I said, this is one of these things that would get called conspiracy theory, but the details are out in the open now.
Yeah, and we've done two parts so far. Just recorded one before this, and we discussed it. And the way we do this is we read a paragraph, and then we go back and forth and discuss it. So I read a paragraph, we discuss it. He reads a paragraph, we discuss it. We've had separate conversation series where we've talked about different topics like critical theory, which through in the book Cynical Theories, 1619 Project. We did one about You Are What You Consume, just talking about food and things like that. The most recent one was the Ivory Tower, Cracks in the Ivory Tower, the moral mess of higher education. So Stephen is a friend of mine. We just like talking about certain things. And with an article like this, part of the key things with politics, like people just talk about things. It's a topic. It's one of the few topics where people will actively avoid source material and actual content about it, yet want their actual opinions about it to be as worthwhile as other people who actually looked into it. Yeah. By the voting pattern, but not even just the voting aspect, which is very unique to politics, but specifically in conversation, they'll speak and make certain declarations as some kind of people. And I think part of the problem that's happened with the last 4 years and even earlier than that is the perception of Trump wasn't from actually getting the content. So we don't want to be part of those people who just talk about certain things without actually having. So we decided, hey, let's actually just read this, and you can come along with us on this journey. And there's going to be links to the article. If you haven't read it before, you can go along with us. It's also going to be on the screen once we get into actually reading the actual article. One thing I wanted to mention, what you said, we do think this, we might be biased. Again, we have some biases. Like Stephen and I don't know if you even know the dimension. It was like, okay, on behalf of Biden, I don't think they'll ever come out and say that outright in this article that was on behalf of Biden. But they've already mentioned that in specific, they were thinking Trump was trying to interfere from earlier. Trump was trying to mess up from earlier. The title of the article is "Saved the 2020 Election." There's some phrases here going on with the language being used that presented an opportunity to shore it up. So I think even some of this, there was something when people were talking about it's the safest election ever. And it's like, okay, so Trump was such a garbage human being and such a garbage leader that was bungling this pandemic, this unprecedented pandemic. And we've had years of elections. But under Trump, somehow they managed to have the most secure and safe election ever. So you're saying Trump actually did something good? So even with this article, this could also be part of them be like, no, it wasn't Trump. If this was left up to Trump, he would have messed up the election. He would have done some fraud stuff. But it was us. It was us coming in. They're coming in behind the scenes, a secret cabal. We were the ones who were going to take credit for the safest election ever. I don't know what's going on with these people. What do you think?
Well, as I've said a few times, I think it's just they see it as what we're doing is ultimately for the greater good. So, yeah, we're playing dirty games, but because the outcome is, in our perception, better for the country, it's okay to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not as extreme, but it's almost like, would you kill baby Hitler thing? Oh, you're murdering a baby. Oh, but I'm saving millions of lives. Oh, I'm rigging the election, but oh, don't worry, it's going to stop Hitler 2.0, so it's worth it. Similar reasoning. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Reality itself, reality is what it is. Like, and this is part of my part of my driving main things I think about with society and things, with the world existence. Problems occur not because of what X is, but because of how you define X. Mm-hmm. That's where the problem happens. And I think with this is an attempt to say like, okay, X is what happened in an election. That's the information that's out. That's things like looking into the room and seeing the video of the people in Georgia pulling the things from under the table and counting. That hasn't really been explained. We haven't heard those people talk. Those people haven't been mentioned. They haven't come out. I'm waiting for them to come out and actually have an interview. But no, they've lawyered up and they've disappeared. But there's been a time when I think Trump and many other people were saying it's Y, it's Z, it's A through Y. They were talking about all those things. Now I think this is Time Magazine coming out and saying, no, it's none of those things, or this person. Again, I need to mention the person who wrote this, Molly Ball, and this
Yeah.
the people involved in this. I think they're coming out in part to say that, okay, it's not Y that Trump was saying. It's not A through everything else that people have been saying. It's Z. This is what it was. So I think it's part of framing it. The impeachment trial is coming in, starting tomorrow, as we're recording this on Monday. It's starting tomorrow, and I think there was also a chance that some of this content was going to be brought up during the impeachment trial,
Yeah.
and it will definitely not go away. This is a new time we're living in. There's a lot more access to information. This is going back to politics. The political actors are going back to pre-social media political actors of pre-2000, but we're living in a different world with this information being out there. You can't erase the internet of this. They've already done attempts to do things like wipe the internet from things that Trump has been saying, and his Twitter account was shut down. I think they've archived it. I don't know if you can still search the stuff.
That's a good question.
It's not that straightforward to get the actual speech that Trump gave on July 6th. You're going to find certain things. There's going to be certain attempts, but there's too many archives and there's too many people who can actually get this information. So you might as well get ahead of this and start trying to put the kind of lens that people would actually take this information through. I think that's part of it. There's many other possibilities that this could be. And there's a question to you guys, gals, and everything else in between that actually listen to this. What do you think this was? This was a question we asked for the first part of this when we recorded. When did you first hear about it? What do you think some of the primary reasons that drove them to actually have this? Is this a victory lap? Is it some guilt? Is it white people snitching on themselves? Like, what do you think it is? Like, it's a question to kind of ask.
Well, I was going to add on too to your point about the people in Georgia. The point I kept emphasizing to a few people is that you see this stuff on camera and they're saying, "Oh, it's nothing suspicious. It's standard behavior." Well, if it's standard behavior, that woman in the camera could easily go on MSNBC or something and say, "Look, what I'm doing is standard practice. They have the wrong impression of me. I'm prepared to testify in court if need be." And then it's like, okay, that would sort of, what's the word? Assuage. I'm trying to think, like, dissipate some of the, like, skepticism or whatever. But instead it's like people said, "No, I saw shady stuff. I've signed an affidavit. I'll testify in court." And then she disappears. It's like, that just makes you wonder.
It's assuage some of the concerns. Like, she could easily come out and say, okay, like, I know I wasn't supposed to use these printers. I know they were calibrated to count ballots, but one of my friends figured out a way to change these around. And then with all these shutdowns, our kids haven't been able to go around. So we had a community gathering type of thing. And then my kids and my nephews and my nieces, they had like a Yu-Gi-Oh kind of competition. So we wanted to print these flyers for their Yu-Gi-Oh thing. That could be what actually happened.
Yeah.
But I just want it to be addressed. And some of those things were not being addressed. So these are kind of things. And some of these things have already been addressed in the first two parts. We're getting into the alliance part here. So we're going to get to more. It's a rather lengthy article. I do suggest, if you haven't read it, you can just follow us with this series and then get to it, because I think it'll be something it's rather significant. I think the difference between this kind of activity isn't new. What's new is that it's news, that you can actually experience it as it's going on, that live streaming of kind of things. And there's another thing I mentioned. I want to come back with the last one. We'll just double check on certain things I'd mentioned. I was talking about the American way of looking at things, and I kind of pulled back and was like, okay, maybe it's not specifically Americans where you have to dial things down. Like, if they say something social political is like, they claim poverty, they claim hunger. Oh, I'm starving. You don't think of what starving normally means. Wind it down to like the two where it's like, oh, I've been awake for 10 hours and haven't eaten. That's what an average American would say starving in. That's due to perception. But I think with this one, these social political issues, it's more like I've really looked into peaceful parenting and the non-aggression principle and those kind of concepts, and I'm very adamant in thinking that the basis to a better world, more human flourishing, more societies that are more cohesive and more successful. I think you look at different demographics and groups within different societies, different cultures, different locations, and I think the groups that do the best, you could probably look at the lowest adverse childhood scores between those groups, and those kids will grow up to be the best when you have technology, when you have information, you have the ability to have tools. So for me, that's one massive topic. If somebody comes up just joking around about hitting a kid, that's something that I really engage, because I think it's very important. On average, most people who are even supportive of peaceful parenting don't really think it's that big of a deal. They haven't built up the reasoning and ideas that, no, this is something you really need to address. I really feel like if I can address this, the more kids, if I talk to people and one fewer kid is hit, one fewer time than they would have been hit before, it's worth having the conversation. that's how serious of a thing that I think it is. But other people hit their kids. Other people think, okay, I don't hit my kids, but I don't want to engage other people. They don't think it's that important. So to them, if they hear it's happening, they're like, meh. But for me, it's like, no, 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 we've got to stop that. So I think this is kind of how it is for some people. For some people, Trump was like hitting your kid. He was that dangerous to their perception of what a successful society could be. But for me, I'm like, meh, I don't really see it. But I think a difference is with me and some of the people that I've seen with this sense. If I bring up peaceful parenting, I'm willing to take my time and talk about it and provide the evidence for why I think that. Most of the people who say these things about Trump, when I try to engage them, they don't provide reasons or just say educate yourself, or it comes down to be something very surface level. So that's, I think, one of the differences that I'll see with those kind of things.
Or I heard from this person that he said this, or some of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'm not dismissing your lived experience and perception of what's going on. What I'm saying is, if there's lightning outside and you think it's a lion roaring, I'm not dismissing that you believe that, but it's also not a lion roaring.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what I'm trying to actually discuss, so we can actually establish what that sound actually was. Okay, if you have anything else to say, or we just jump into this.
We can jump right in, sure.
Okay, lead us off this time.
Okay, so this section is called The Alliance. On March 3rd, Podhorzer drafted a 3-page confidential memo titled "Threats to the 2020 election," unquote. No, wait. Oh, yeah, sorry. Trump has made it clear that this will not be a fair election. He will reject anything but his own reelection as, quote, faked and, quote, rigged, he wrote on November 3rd. Should the media report otherwise, he will use the right-wing information system to establish his narrative and incite his supporters to protest. The memo laid out 4 categories of challenges: attacks on voters, attacks on election administration, attacks on Trump's political opponents, and efforts to reverse the results of the election.
Okay, right. So again, this has been after 4 years of many in the media calling Trump an illegitimate president. Many people are talking about how the Russians actually did collude. There's recordings of people like Senator Elizabeth Warren, I think Senator Klobuchar. They came out, and there's recordings of them actually mentioning, I might try to remember to actually find those recordings of them talking about the lack of security when it comes to certain forms of mail-in voting, the way there's issues with certain systems and things like that. It's also an unprecedented pandemic going on. And I mentioned before how before with mail-in voting, when it was about 40 million people voting, it was at a level of it was like 4% rejection rate on the people mailing in. It was, okay, this signature doesn't match. Oh, we can't tell who the person marked. And then this election with 160 million people voting by mail, it dropped down something like 0.03%. That is an anomaly. And again, this might be explained. There might actually be data for them to show us that, look, we actually happened to do it because of this place. We found where most of the mail-in votes come in, and then we ensured there was actually people going to teach these people how to actually count for things. But some cases, there's some places where they clearly is admission where it's like, okay, these people changed the laws and changed the standards of this. And those questions are still out there without going through the legally accepted process within that state of how to do that through the legislature. It was done through different decrees. These are things that are actually there. So those are the questions that I have. Are those things actually done? How did these things kind of happen? Because this whole idea that it's this Trump and things who can rig elections and things like that and say it's fake, you've been saying it was a fake election. People have been saying that it's not their president. So it's not just Trump saying that. Elections have been flawed, not just in the United States of America. You're not that exceptional Americans. There's some things that are exceptional about you, just like there's some things exceptional about other people, about Chinese people, about the Dutch, about the Kenyans. But in this sense, when it comes to politics, it's nothing exceptional about the United States of America when it comes to their actual ability to remove all fraud and be so safe and secure with elections. This is just, it's an absurdity.
And that's been my commentary too. Like people, oh, it was Russia. Russia stole the election. Russia interfered. You have no idea. And then now suddenly this was the most secure election in our lifetimes. Like, you mean to tell me that foreign actors can get in here, shift it dramatically in one direction, and then a few years later it's perfectly fine? I mean, it makes no sense. Security tightened that much.
That is kind of the case what they're making, right? This alliance and the architects, and it's okay. So let's keep going.
All right, so you want to read the next paragraph, or would you like me to read it?
COVID-19 erupted at the height of the primary election season. Normal methods of voting were no longer safe for voters or the mostly elderly voters who normally staff polling places. But political disagreements intensified as Trump's crusade against mail voting prevented some states from making it easier to vote absentee and for jurisdictions to count those votes on a timely manner. Chaos ensued. Ohio shut down in person voting for its primary, leading to minuscule turnout. A poll worker shortage in Milwaukee, where Wisconsin's heavily Democratic black population is concentrated, left just 5 open polling places, down from 182. In New York, vote counting took more than a month.
Hmm. All right, so let me see here. Yeah, of course, heavily Democratic, black population, race baiting. You know, let's see, what else did I want to say on this? Not a whole lot to say here. I mean, I think it's mostly stuff we just talked about concerns with mail-in voting and suspicions and all that.
There's a few specifics here for me. Is right here with the New York. There's somebody in New York. There was a contested, I think, congressional seat. Somebody is coming out and compete. It is a Democratic individual who's coming out and saying, actually, there's some issues with the voting systems there. There was another recent thing. This is somewhat related. It's adjacent to this. Amazon was having an issue with their unions, and Jeff Bezos came out and said he doesn't trust the system of mail-in voting that they have there. When you look at this thing talking about mail-in voting in actual places, Florida previously had a lot of issues. That was one of the last contested elections with the hanging Chad situation. And they've taken steps over several elections that this election, they had a rather good system and everything came in. When you talk about here, now they're talking about wide Ohio, they're talking about New York. It's not, did they say New York City or did they say New York? You live in New York area right now. So New York, you see the thing in New York, in Ohio, Milwaukee, where Wisconsin's heavily now Milwaukee is a city. That's one location.
Yeah.
Ohio is a rather important city. That was one place that was many of the polls are saying was going to go to Biden. It ended up going to Trump. But you look at a place. You look at Cincinnati. Then you look at a neighboring area like Pittsburgh, or you look at familiar kind of. You look at Cleveland. You look at Cincinnati. These are kind of same demographically. They're kind of same weather-wise, same population, similar kind of ways where you can say, why did one city end up getting all their numbers in at one time, but this other city struggled? Why was this city coming in a lot later? So there's those kind of comparisons that you can see where it's like, okay, why was Florida able to get all their things in at one time with these same kind of systems and machinations that you're saying? But supposedly it's just these key places that had to shut down and then also take the time. Why were these places ahead of time already saying, we're going to accept people, we're going to be counting, we're going to accept votes coming in from 3 days after? What is the kind of thing? Why can't you have that kind of system where that is in check? And if you're able to actually change some of these things, why don't you use the actual legislative system that was in there? Those are just some of the questions that I had, and maybe they'll answer them, but maybe they won't.
Yeah, and also that it's now a famous graphic, but that whole thing on election night about how Trump was ahead, and there was that sort of sudden jump upwards. It's like, you mean to tell me in all these areas enough votes for Biden happened to come in to push him overhead every single time? It's like, come on. No.
Yeah, and I hear someone say like, okay, the thing that supposedly addresses that to some people have brought up was, oh, well, that was an unofficial tally. That was something that was just got in. They were just gotten the thing, and then they got some data and came in. Then I said, okay, if that happened, it happened in quite a few places. I think it was Wisconsin happened, in Michigan it happened.
Yeah.
If you can say that in the couple of times that it did happen, can you find one of these unofficial tallies where there was a jump for Trump coming up and Biden instead stayed normal, or Biden actually dropped? Can you find one of those? Why are all the actual examples of these just human error glitches happening to be for Biden? This is kind of the suspicious things that were actually just that are out there that I still haven't seen being addressed. And if to you it's enough evidence coming back, that's your perception of the world. Just how for some people they think, oh, it's just a spank on the bomb. I'm not actually hitting them with a stick. It's just a spank on the bomb. They're not going to remember that. For some people, that's what they believe. For me, I know, no, I'm not going to, you shouldn't hit your kids at all. So we understand people look at the world in diverse ways, and what it is X is what X is. Reality is what reality is. Whether I think it's Z or whether you think it's Y, X is what it is. So yeah.
Yeah, and there was other stuff too, like, they talked about ballots that come in that look identical. There were like a batch of military ballots that were all Biden, which was weird because the military favored Trump. Like, all these things, I mean, the election irregularities, that could be a whole topic in of itself, but you can come up with like at least 20 things or more that don't make sense. And it's like, if you question it, it's just how dare you question this? Again, independent thinkers question things that don't add up. And if you can't give me a good explanation, I'm going to suspect foul play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For video two, I'm going to put a link. I'll try to remember to include this. There's a site called Here is the Evidence for those people who are interested, and it is something that is categorized with which sort of evidence it is, the importance of the evidence. It has sections where, okay, these are people who just is unverified stuff. These are other stuff. Okay, with this one, it's like the legal kind of laws and kind of things that happen. The data that we have on this. There's reports that were put out by I forget the actual person's name, but I'll try to remember who the person who did that name for the actual report. So there's actual data out there that you can go out. And this is the thing: if you're an infoholic like I am, it's the greatest time to your life. It's just the age of information coming in. But understanding is a different thing. Sometimes it makes some things harder to understand because you have that deluge of information. But don't just have somebody say, oh, this is what you should think about this. The information is there, the data is there, you can actually go out and actually find it, versus the off the wall and selective things that you might have heard reported about certain things.
Yeah, well, there's the Voter Integrity Project with Matt Brainard, if that's what you're referring to, and there's also the Democracy the Democracy Institute. They were the ones who came up with like 20 different anomalies or something, and they're actually left leaning. But the guy said he's like, if pointing these out makes me a crank, call me a crank. He's like, not like nobody has lost the election and had all these things go in their favor, so that should raise suspicions to any thinking person.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, these are things that maybe Mr. Podhauser here had actually known about those things. And he said, okay, we can twist this around because we have this new technology of the tech. We have now these alliances, this handshake with these billionaires who have a crazy amount of money and influence. We have this populace who really dislikes this Trump fellow. So they might have realized, hey, we can do this in a different way and figure out how to use those things. And then all these other things we're going to do, we're going to flip that around. We're going to have the major media sources on our side. We have world leaders on our side. So with all those people arrayed, they might have been able to do different things within the actual bounds. So that's all I'm saying. These are the things that actually happened. Let's actually see what it is. Let's see that X. So get us more to the X in the next paragraph.
Okay, let's see here. Suddenly, the potential for a November meltdown was obvious. In his apartment in the D.C. suburbs, Podhorzer began working from his laptop at his kitchen table, holding back-to-back Zoom meetings for hours a day with his network of contacts across the progressive universe. The labor movement, the institutional left, like Planned Parenthood and Greenpeace, resistance groups, there's that name, like Indivisible and Move On, progressive data geeks and strategists, representatives of donors and foundations, state-level grassroots organizers, racial justice activists, and others. All right, I have a few things to say, but take it away.
Yeah, again, the resistance, like you mentioned, we talked about this before. What are they resisting? Who were they resisting? How are they resistance with all these people arrayed on their side already? And now that they've won, what is the resistance? That's part of the issue here. They spent so much time framing things as the resistance that they activated a lot of the people I mentioned in that bell curve, where the people in the average in the middle just want to go back to life as usual because Trump, Biden, to them, their life is in a way where they're not really that affected by politics and they're not really that into it. But the people on the edges, on the fringes of both sides, both supportive and against the things that they claim for, they've been really activated. And some of those people, millions of people, you're not going to get, there's millions of people back who've really bought into literally Nazis. Not in the, literally means figure like whatever, like this is literally the worst day of my life. Like the person doesn't literally mean it's the worst day of their life. But there's some people who literally believe that if somebody says that, it's their worst day of their life. I'm the kind of person who I would not say something like, "Oh, this is the worst day of my life," and unless I actually think it is, because at the point in my life, I just don't use language that loosely. But the people that literally now believe right wingers are white supremacists, not in the whole micro racism kind of microaggression kind of sense of, oh, this person doesn't want to date this black woman, so he's a white supremacist. No, that's not racism in that sense. When black women say like, oh, we want black men should be for black women, like the black queen is the best woman for nobody can cheat a white woman like that. Like there's this Muhammad Ali thing. I think I'll try to also leave that as a link where he's just talking about he's in this interview he comes out and he's like, there's no way like no way like there's not even a black woman, like it's an African American, like an African American woman. There's no other woman that can treat me, that can know who I am, that can really live for me. I'm not going to go and sit with a white woman. I'm just paraphrasing. It's like, all right, it's Muhammad Ali. Keep on saying this. maybe you can still get away with saying that right now. Like if LeBron James came out and said it about black women, I think he'd get a pass. But if
Yeah.
Tom Brady came out and said that about Giselle Bundchen and be like, yeah, part of the reason I've won my seventh Super Bowl, I mean, like the greatest of all time and things like this, is because I had a white woman who really understood me. Like no other woman could really understand me and support my life like this. No, they would drag this
No, it
man.
would
This
not.
man would be dragged for saying that. But Muhammad Ali come out and said that. It's like, yeah, but that's how people are. People, birds of a feather do flock together.
Mhm.
Like people on the political left, they don't want to date people on the political right because they have
No.
certain things of that. I am somebody who's really strong on like peaceful parenting, like I said. There's no reason for me to even entertain somebody that isn't supportive of peaceful parenting. Because
Sure.
in my opinion, dating normally leads to relationships, normally leads to actually marrying somebody, which is created in order to have like kids and things like that. So why would I even bother getting to the basics of that if I know there's going to be a chance to get there, and that will still be a primary issue in the main thing a relationship is made for. So I'm not even against people being discriminatory in that sense, but I'm just saying like that. How have you won now? Now is it over? Now as racial justice activists, have you guys won? Is Planned Parenthood now safe and secured and all these things? And spoiler, no, it's not. They're going to find other people. We are the bad orange man now. So yeah, keep going.
Well, yeah, just sort of my own commentary on that specific paragraph is something like labor movement. Well, what are we talking about? This is the whole Marxist thing of, yeah, we fight for the workers, but you find out it's wealthy people funding it, organizing all that. It's like, did some spontaneous group get together and decide, hey, we're going to fight for our rights and we're going to talk to other people? Or no, did some rich person say, hey, say these things, push for these, we'll give you money and favors? Institutional left, well, to me that's pretty much everything. I mean, academia, big tech, a lot of state, local governments, all that. Resistance groups, again, I don't get what resistance, again, like what are you resisting? And then where is it here, state level grassroots organizers. I mean, I know some of those are, but again, I don't know how grassrootsy those are, because if you read like Rothbard talking about the foundation of the Fed, he said how it was presented as a spontaneous grassroots uprising, but some of JP Morgan's main guys were there at these events, not exactly grassroots. So I'd imagine they do similar things here. Like, and that's something, of course, I always hammered AOC for, is that she says, oh, I'm a girl from the Bronx, wanted to represent my district. It's like, your chief of staff is a multimillionaire who worked on Wall Street in Silicon Valley. The Justice Democrats is funded by Soros, who has billions. This is not grassroots. You may put up that image, but in reality, it's not a group of people got together and decided to work. And then racial justice activists, same thing. Again, BLM, where's that $10.6 billion? Not exactly resistance. I mean, they showed like the GDP of some small like Eastern European countries or some Caribbean countries is like less than that. So no.
Yeah, so you have this kind of wording and things in there. Like the unions, I like public sector unions. It's such an odd thing. They have a sort of monopoly on the actual sectors they normally are in. Then you have a situation where they're being paid through the money that's been taxed from people, and then somehow they pay union dues, and then those unions somehow have involvement. You have politicians who are sitting on the boards of unions with their actual investors. And just listen to Yaron Brook was on the latest Power Hour with Alex Epstein.
Okay.
Still need to amazing show, amazing stuff there. And he was talking about this. He was reiterating my ideas about my thoughts, and it just worries. Like when you tax people in the public sector, the money, their salary is being paid with tax money.
Yeah.
And then you tax that money from them. They pay income tax from the tax money they've been paid, and then you give them a rebate of the money. Like, why don't you just not take it from them to begin with? Because it's already money that was taken from. It's just some of the things that they're working in. They're talking about the people that invest with the actual from those unions, and the politicians actually sit on the boards of the people investing the retirement plans of these places. And it's just a smorgasbord of mess. But when you talk about this, people say, oh, these people have declared that they support Trump, so they shouldn't be trusted because they will work for Trump.
Yeah.
When you have something like the Postal Workers Union declaring ahead of time that they're for Biden, and then people kind of say, wouldn't that be kind of some thing where they might go and work kind of for Biden and kind of bias if they're supporting him? Oh, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no. The public sector is different from the private sector. The public sector is entirely people who just want to do things for the greater good. They're public servants. They would not want to do that. And there's no possible way they would do it. They're just doing it for the greater good. but these other grassroots thing, okay, the grassroots thing, but those are just individual people. Wait, Mark Zuckerberg put like $350 million in that thing. Like he's
Yeah.
not, he's part of a big corp, but that's a good corporation. Facebook is doing it, so it's
Yeah.
just
No.
it's lies all the way down. It's just equivocation all the way down, and I'm at least glad we can actually see the stuff out here. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say to your point, that comes up with the climate change debate too. If you question any of the fundamentals, it's your shill paid for by fossil fuel industries. But if the government gives you money to research this and come up with things that require more intervention in the economy, all that, somehow you're a pure actor who just cares about the climate. I mean, the climate industry, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's like you mean to tell me people getting money from the taxpayers saying, oh, this is so bad, we need more money, we need more money. You mean to tell me there's no self-interest on their part? Come on. No.
Yeah, that was one of the primary things that Yaron Book was on to discuss.
Yeah.
Was one of the biggest one of the biggest people who organized, not a hedge fund. It's a public sector retirement plan kind of thing. First of all, that's a Ponzi scheme. I think you've seen people kind of talk about it's just it's something you can't really talk about, but people kind of understand. There's no possible way once the boomers actually retire that there's going to be enough money to actually pay these people off. It's literally not there.
No.
But so that's something that's coming. That's going to be something that society is going to have to deal with. If America has to deal with something that big, the rest of the world is going to have a knock-on effect of dealing with it somehow. But he was just talking about how this company was a certain individual who's leading that company, who's a very powerful man by virtue of being the CEO or the top of that company. He sent out a letter to different people in the industry and said, if you're an energy company, if you're involved in this, we're not going to invest in your company. We're not going to buy stock unless you're pro green energy. You do all these things towards these kind of things. And if you think that doesn't create massive incentives to find and invest in certain ways, and the reallocation of wealth that happens, of resources that happen to this kind of thing, is massive. Where someone might be like, "Look, I'm running a company, and it's up to me to ensure that we have profits for my shareholders." And then these people say, like, they're investors, and then they say, "Okay, we're not going to invest in you unless you actually work with solar power." So this person goes out and says, okay, we're going to get solar power, and it might cost us, we might only be able to get a net profit of 5 million because of the cost of solar power. Yet if we were using something like a natural gas-fired plant or the nuclear plant, we'd be able to get 10 million because it's just cheaper and more reliable energy. Someone might think that, but then if this person is not investing the 500 million they're going to invest in your company, by you making that decision to go to nuclear, then you'll take that hit of 5 million because you're not going to get the 500 million contract to do this other kind of thing. So those kind of incentives are constant and they're happening all over the place. So this whole idea that look at the growth in the fossil, look at the growth in the green energy type of things, it's driven in large part due to things like that. It's not just an organic drive towards that.
Or the one point it sort of adds on, I thought about what Bob Murphy was talking about with the carbon tax ideas, how they say, oh, we need this to protect the environment or whatever. And then he says the same thing. He's like, okay, but if oil companies don't want this, oh, they're greedy shills who just want to keep more of their own money. But then if the government says, hey, if we do this, we'll get more of their money. Again, somehow people act like the government has no interest. You mean to tell me the people who are collecting the taxes don't have an interest in getting more money? I mean, come on.
And it's a similar thing, just how people were thinking, oh, Trump, because he's supported by white supremacists, once he gets into power, he's going to give back to the white supremacists. That's a similar thing with here. Once Biden, you think Biden and his people don't realize that part of this activity wasn't part of why they've gotten to power, and you think all of a sudden they're not going to have their own interests on the quid pro quo when it comes to this kind of situation? There is that. Just because you think these are more viable, like these are more positive kind of things to support, Planned Parenthood and things like that, versus maybe some industry that's into family planning and things like that on the other end, like a March for Life type of people and things like that, you might think, okay, those people are against something we stand for, but those people have their belief system. They have their own structure of things that they care for too. You might think, okay, it's good to have this green energy in this kind of situation versus this oil company. But the oil company has its own interests, has its own employees, has its own structures, has its own positives. So it's the trade-offs that we happen in these kind of things, like we mentioned in the last videos. Like economics is everywhere. It's these are the cost-benefit analysis exchanges that we deal with.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so next.
Yeah, we can go next.
Okay. In April, Podhoser began hosting a weekly 2.5-hour Zoom. It was structured around a series of rapid fire 5-minute presentations on everything from which ads were working to messaging to legal strategy. The invitation-only gatherings soon attracted hundreds, created a rare shared base of knowledge for the fractious progressive movement. At the risk of talking trash about the left, there's not a lot of good information sharing, says Anat Shankar Osorio, a close podhoser friend who poll tested messaging guidance whose poll testing messaging guidance shaped the group's approach. There's a good lot of not invented here syndrome. The people won't consider a good idea that they didn't come up with. Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting line in there about trash talking about the left. So because we talk about how there's sort of the progressive wing of the Democrats versus the establishment types, and I think that's sort of what happened in this election. They talked about how Antifa and BLM were sort of used. Like there's all those memes about that, like, I don't want to play with you anymore and all that, where, okay, they use some of this stuff to come to power, but Biden ultimately is a corporate Democrat. He's not a socialist who's going to jack up taxes and tax everyone out of existence. He's going to benefit these people who helped him come into power, but he wanted to sort of throw some bones to these people so they support him. Then once in charge, and with Hillary, I said it would have been the same thing as well. It's, we're going to do favors for our corporate buddies, favors for China, all this. And then it's like, we're not going to implement socialism. So,
Yeah.
So it's like the progressive wing. I don't know if they believe they can gain enough power to do that. I don't know if they don't realize they're being played. I don't know if they see this as a compromise. Like, I'm not 100% sure, but that's kind of what this makes me think of.
It goes into like the individuals within those groups and who's actually in the know and who's actually aware about certain things. So it's not even outright class thing. There's wealthy people who are just hardworking who've actually have just cut their teeth on it. There's other people who've gotten in there. There's people working at McDonald's who got in through some shady kind of stuff that don't work at all. And then there's some very hardworking people at McDonald's. That the United itself is not something that really matters or shows much to me. And you have this kind of situation where people on the left say, okay, we're not sharing ideas, we're not working together. But then that's also something that's also said about people on the right. To say, people on the right don't come together and like people on the left do. So this is the kind of thing where it's like when you're inside, you view your team in a certain way, then you view the other team. Like I remember there's this whole time where people were like, oh, the left is crumbling, left is coming apart. It seems during the last kind of thing, and then now that's what they're saying about the right. And I think both of them are right. It's just neither of them are actually as cohesive as they thought. When this whole situation went. There's another thing that came out recently. That thing, it was some talk given by somebody high in the financial system in China, and he was talking about how like, oh, we have some people in Wall Street, or we know this person. He was just hinting like, oh yeah, the guy coming in with like Biden and things. I was like, why would they just release this? Like, do they not know? Because it was something that was recorded by the people in China. They have control over the media, a lot more control than the people in the West. So they recorded it, produced it, post-produced it, posted it on their social media outlets, and then like after the reaction, they kind of deleted it and they took it down. But for them to be kind of that brazen was kind of like this, where it's like people were like, okay, we just put it out, because most people don't care. Like most people are nowhere as close to involved into politics as me and you are. So for most people, they won't read this. Most people don't really care. They just know like Trump's out, for them it doesn't matter. Most people won't actually follow and realize that. Because I saw some Americans say like, I can't believe these people are selling us out. These people in Wall Street are selling us out. Look, those people on Wall Street are not your typical Americans. They don't think of the United States of America like the average American might. These people who are shocked about, don't they have care? Because some of those people also falsely look at the CCP, these people in China, and say, oh, at least we understand those people are doing it for the Chinese people. Why are our people selling us out? It's like those people aren't doing it for the Chinese people. The people in the CCP are not the average Chinese person.
No.
Those people are in their own gang. They're in their own cabal. They're in their own little in-group of really wealthy people, really powerful people. Yeah. They deal with their own things. It's like the owners of NFL teams have their own interests that are separate from the average person who works at the stadium of an NFL team or an average fan. So that's the kind of thing. We're watching like the owners of these kind of corporation, team, institution, farms, kind of things that we call states, that they're dealing with their own ins and outs of how they run those things, and they trade. Oh, we'll trade you this, we'll do that. Like it's a different kind of cabal. Your average CCP politician has about as much care about Chinese-ness as your average Wall Street person, as your average top politician. They're not really that much into that whole national pride, populist type of idea. They're really kind of in general against populism in that sense.
Well, I was going to say it's interesting too because my lipstick lesbian's half Taiwanese, and I used to have a roommate from Taiwan as well. And if you bring up China, they really make a point of that. They're like, we like the Chinese people, not the government, because ethnically they're along the same lines. They're both Han Chinese, but they acknowledge that the CCP is not working on behalf of the average person. So it's like they see the average Chinese citizen as a prisoner of this oppressive government, and the CCP is an evil organization, which I pretty much agree with.
And it's not even like, again, I want to say it's not a bad thing. It's a natural thing. One of the other sayings that I say is like, I am not, unlike everybody else, I am not unique. And in that sense, people say like, I'm unique. There was a thing that people used to say, oh, I'm unique. Everybody's unique. Unique snowflake. But if everybody's unique, then aren't you all the same in the fact that you're all unique? But for me, I was like, I'm not unique. I'm just the result of the experiences I've had. My experience is a little different, growing up in different continents. That's why I'm a bit more aware and accepting and actually thinking of the positives of actually being in global society now, because that's been my childhood and things like that. So I can kind of relate to see why, if you've actually lived in these different countries, known people from different places, had a different idea in your mind as you're growing up of what the world is, versus somebody who's like, I've only grown up in this town, in this state, in this location, speaking this one language, eating this kind of food, singing these kind of songs, thinking this kind of country is those kind of people are going to have a different outlook on the world than the people who've been traveling around the world, who know people in different continents, who speak different languages, that kind of thing. And there's that kind of massive divide where you see that, where I think wrongly people are like, but you're an American, how come you don't think this way? Because all the Americans I know think this way. But no, that's because you live within a certain group of Americans that define America as something else than these other people do. And so those are the kind of things that people need to stop assuming that that person is using that word or feeling in the same way that you would use that word or feeling.
And just to sort of add on to one of your points too, I was thinking we were talking about all this stuff with Trump. I think about now how romanticized Obama was. We touched a little bit on this, but like even so, like I've seen that meme going around about life in 2015, hugging a stranger, you could do this. Obama was president. Like they act like it was some kind of golden era, and it was not empirically at all. I mean, you had racial unrest, widening income gap, deficit. It's like it's a like we can debate somebody like Reagan where you can get into like how he raised taxes, how deficit issues, all that. But it's like you can point to a lot of economic growth. Same with the Clinton era, again, a bubble, but you can make the case. But like they act like Obama's presidency was some kind of golden era. And it's like I don't see how on any metric that really applies.
And that's one of the things that I'll just embrace that word now. I am very excited to see the reaction that people are going to have, because people haven't had an actual view of politics as usual ever since there's been this much access to information. And there's definitely millions of more people now who are interested in politics than were percentage-wise of the population everywhere in the world than were in before the social media. And remember, like Trump, no, it wasn't even Trump. It was Obama was the first social media kind of president. He came out in 2008. I think Facebook launched in 2007. I mean, there was like MySpace, there was Friendster, there was those kind of things. Like there was what was that journal? There was it was like journal.com. It was LiveJournal. I think it was called LiveJournal. There was things like that where internet was a part of some people's lives, but it was not that used. 24/7 news was kind of there. There was a few places. The perception people had of CNN, of certain sources, were this is CNN, where it's just like, this is not a biased news source. This is just a good, well-researched type of thing. There's no such thing as fake news. Even things like ideas like conspiracy theories, things like that. I just found out that, listen to the No Agenda podcast, and apparently the term conspiracy theory came out. It was invented by the CIA, and they seeded it sometime right before the JFK assassination. They started seeding that in the general populace, the term conspiracy theory. And these kind of things where people used to just have certain suspicions, or they thought the government was benign, and this golden age type of thing. So when you got into the media coverage of the Obama presidency, with him being the anointed one, getting the mostly peaceful, mostly about the things you do actually in the past rather than the potential things you do about Peace Prize, win that he actually got, with that kind of thing, him being the black president, him being the person that's proven that racism has ended, he was the golden child. He was the chosen one. Like, you couldn't actually besmirch him. He was people had to tiptoe around him. oh, there was no scandals in his actual book because you couldn't cover any of the actual negative things that were actually happening. Fast and Furious, other things. Um, the no, wait, was the Vegas shooting during Trump's time or during Obama's time? That thing has been ghosted, has been memory hold
Oh
so
yeah, that's a
serious.
good question. Actually, I'd have to look that up.
Okay, those things that were happening, there was riots, Freddie Gray, those kind of things.
Yeah.
The Black Lives Matter movement came up during the Obama times. It wasn't during Trump.
No.
I bet you could ask people now, when did Black Lives Matter start? Many of them would probably say during Trump. Many of them would
Occupy
probably say,
Occupy Wall Street started under Obama too.
yeah. So
Yeah.
there was issues that were going on, but think about
Yeah.
how those things were covered during those times. So this is a time when now we're going to have politics as usual. Biden coming in with just like solid ass, like this is political theater. We're keeping this on the narrow road. I'm the hardcore politician. We tell you one thing and do the other to your face. We don't really care about answering your question. Oh, you're asking us, we're just going to walk off stage. You're not going to listen. With that coverage, with the way they've actually piqued people and made people have certain expectations of how their media is coverage, that's going to be quite an interesting, exciting thing to keep the eye on. There's going to be a lot of frustration, and there's going to be a lot of people who feel they can't air this frustration because airing this frustration would make them part of Orange Man Bad's team and things like this. It's going to be really interesting.
I saw this garbage article recently from the New York Times, as usual, talking about how the economy always does better under Democrat presidents. And I'm thinking, like, how did you arrive at this? And then they hold up FDR's New Deal as a success. I'm like, are you not aware that this was the longest depression in history and unemployment was double digits? So you know how they calculated this? They calculate GDP. Okay, GDP is an incomplete story. The government spends more money. That's a boost to GDP. FDR could dump all this money into programs that are like, oh, look, GDP is so high. This is proof they're doing a good job. Did you look at everything else? It's like, they present things in this very disingenuous way. And the worst thing is, I know people will read this and just lap it up without question, but I know enough about economics where I see this, I'm like, no, this doesn't make sense. Like, you can't tell me the Reagan era was bad economically. You can't tell me my mom said she even knows someone who recently said that the economy was bad under Trump. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like before COVID, I'm like, where do you get this information from? How do you arrive at this? Like, it's like at this point, you're not even thinking for yourself. You're just repeating something you heard from somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's how most people are. Most people are surface level with that, and
Yeah.
that's one thing that we have to deal with. We have to deal, like, when you're having a conversation with somebody, get to understand how engaged are they in the topic. Do they just want to say, "Oh, it's a nice day out. Yeah, it's raining," or do they want to talk about barometric pressure? This is a
Yeah,
word.
barometric pressure.
Barometric.
Or barometric. Barometer. Yeah, something.
They want to go into the details, talk about like weather patterns. They know the cirrus clouds and the stratocumulus and all those. They want to get that deep into the thing, and for most people, they don't. Most people just want to say it's raining, and that's it. Like, if you actually go in deeper, they'll actually like, why are you accosting me with all this information? And I think that's kind of a thing that happens sometimes, where somebody says something, I ask, and they're like, oh, why are you asking me this question? Like, what? You go find this yourself, because maybe they're used to just throwing that out as just something to say, and I'm like, no, you're coming into my field here. Like, I want to get deep into this stuff. And in general, like, I've even told you, I'm like, okay, you're kind of shallow on this. Like, if I choose to mention something, I don't normally talk about certain opinionated things on a shallow level. Like, if I talk about it and you want to understand me better and ask me for evidence for why I said that or think that, if I brought it up, the chances are I have other evidence and things to it. Or I'll just come out and admit that I don't know. But there's too many times when people say something and they get very defensive once they've said the thing.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this recently. This is why we're more selective in who we engage. Because for me, if it's people who just agree with me all the time, I mean, I don't mind talking to them, but it gets boring. If it's somebody who's just going to pick a side, defend it no matter what, like, the family friend who, anytime the Democrats do something bad, he gives a convoluted justification for it. Republicans, like, look the wrong way. It's a crime. So it's like, I don't engage people like that because I know in advance which way the narrative is going to go. And I have a general idea of what he's going to say. Now, if somebody disagrees with me but wants to hear what I have to say and ask me in-depth questions and they're actually going to listen, sure. But like, I make a careful choice in who I engage because it's like, is this worth my time or not? And many times it isn't, unfortunately.
Yeah, but that's what you have to do. I think I recently posted that and said that, like, there's something when you have friendships, when you have relationships, these are mutual things. You're supposed to
Yeah.
engage the people that you're dealing with. So
Yeah.
if you're in a position where you feel uncomfortable in your relationships, it's on you to actually test and see why you're uncomfortable. If somebody's making you feel uncomfortable, ask them about those things that are making you uncomfortable. Don't just sit there and sit and stew in that discomfort and then
No.
go and complain like, oh, I'm so uncomfortable in where I'm so uncomfortable at my work. I'm so uncomfortable with my friends. I'm so uncomfortable with my spouse, my partner. Try to engage with them and see why there is discomfort, because it might be something you're getting wrong. You might be the one who's misconstruing something. That person might have the answer for you, or you might be right about something. And once you get the answer, you can adjust. Maybe it means you move on to something that's more comfortable, or maybe that person has also been misjudging something about you that's been making them tense towards you. But get
Yeah.
out there and communicate and converse and get to more of a status of understanding, because you're the one who's mostly responsible for your own flourishing.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Next paragraph, I think it's yours.
Yeah. All right. Let's see here. Well, let's see.
With the
Let's
meeting.
see. So the meetings became the galactic center for a constellation of operatives across the left who shared overlapping goals but didn't usually work in concert. The group had no name, no leaders, and no hierarchy, but it kept the disparate actors in sync. Quote, Pod played a critical behind the scenes role in keeping different pieces of the movement infrastructure and communication and aligned, says Maurice Mitchell, national director of the Working Families Party. You have the litigation space, the organizing space, the political people just focus on the W, and their strategies aren't always aligned. He allowed this ecosystem to work together.
Okay, again, now we go with the working families party. How are they defining families? It's not just nuclear family. Now, if you're a single mom who's on welfare and not really having a job, are you part of working families party? And as I mentioned before, if you're working, if you're doing anything of effort, you are a worker. The CEO is a worker. He's working for other things to make sure there's orders coming in, make sure the marketing is in check, because he's providing an environment that the people who he's employed can actually use their skills. The managers are employees of the CEOs in sense like and the people on the what's it called the board of directors or people on the manager is normally the employee in some extent of the shareholders in that kind of sense. So they're kind of answering to them for certain things. They're in responsible of managing the human resources and the production in order to return. And so there's a constant rate of that. You can't actually maintain yourself as a valuable producer of anything and keep earning money in the actual market, in the actual freer market, without being useful to somebody, without somebody else being able to employ your services and in exchange money, currency, some kind of thing of value for your services. Like Bill Gates is a billionaire because he's provided a lot of things. Now, from then, there's other things he's doing, working with other people in other senses that I might have issues with, but I'm not one to necessarily begrudge his ability to actually earn the actual money that he's earned in that market kind of sense. So I just have an issue to this. And then again, if you have this whole idea, this perception that, oh, we're working for the downtrodden man, well, you also have some of the wealthiest people in the world, most powerful people in the world right there on your side. So don't give me this whole we are the resistance or we are the people, we are the 99%. No, forget that.
And I sort of get annoyed too, having been a manager. Like people have this idea of, workers, people toiling at the bottom. Oh, the managers just sit back, smoke cigars with their feet up on a desk, and money rolls in. And I'm like, first off, these businesses make risky decisions and often fail. We talked in a previous video how restaurant profit margins are 1% to 3%, maybe 5% if you're lucky. And then it's like, you have to deal with turnover, you have to deal with the health inspection, you have to deal with, obnoxious customers, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, it's not just sit back and money rolls in. It's like you're doing work too. And then it's also, you're responsible for what all the things people under you do as well. So it's a stereotype. I don't know if it's in movies or pop academia or what, but like, oh, the workers are the ones really toiling and everyone else just sits back and rakes in money. It's not like that in reality.
Yeah. And then just to start here, the galactic center of the constellation of operatives, just the flowery language. For some of the people, they really did think they were in some once in a lifetime, like epic D-Day type of in galactic. It's like we're that's why like things like the Star Trek show has now changed. Star Trek Discovery now it's a thing where it's more pandering to speaking to certain kind of people in certain ways and I think Star Wars, people say it's going that way. For these things, for me, these are just basic entertainment things. I'm like, okay, it's for kids. It's whatever.
Yeah.
Or it's somebody else making it creative. If you prefer the older stuff is still there. You can make fanfics. That's kind of my take on that, but that's coming more as a creative who understands that when I have an idea and I create something and put it out, the ideas that I had for that content are not necessarily what will be understood by the people who are out there. Some people might like it, some people might dislike it. And then once my characters and ideas are out there, anybody else can take those ideas and use them. And then when it comes to those kind of things in specific, Star Wars, Star Trek, people can say, oh, we hate the people who are messing it up now. We like the people who had it before. But often for those people to quote unquote mess it up now, those people you supposedly like before they created it had to sell it to them, had sell the rights to them. So blame them if you have to blame anyone. Besides the creators who are just trying to make their money now by pandering to whoever they want to pander to. But anyway, so I know in one end it was like the God Emperor of the United States of America and a kind of troll thing. But then here we talk about the Galactic Center. There's something, it could be something about the word. It could just be words, but it could also be telling, where some people are rather myopic, and it's just also a human thing. I'm starting a company with focusing on storytelling, so it's a vehicle for me to legally get back in the United States and work with people. These people I want to work with, also work on the stories that I've been thinking of, like with Carbon 33, but I'm thinking of a different way of telling stories. And part of the way we look at the world, the lenses, is a hero story where we are the hero. There has to be a bad guy.
Yeah.
There has to be the arc. You have to have the villains, the antagonists, the protagonists. But people are just people. Like we aren't part of a story. Humans aren't a story. We tell stories. So the stories we tell about the things that we do changes what the X is. So this is a way of telling a story about something. So they're thinking they're galactic. But we can't really grasp the galaxy yet.
No.
Some people might, but it's such a massive concept. We see a lot of people who are living in villages who haven't really connected with other people outside of that village.
Yeah.
Imagine that as your purview of what the universe is. We still have racist people. We still have literal racist people who are like, that person is a different race. So on virtue of that, I'm going to make decisions about the whole person. You have people who think because that person is a female and this female did anything, every other female is this bad at that.
Yeah.
That's such an ignorant type of thing. But now imagine when people can truly understand that all the number of people that have lived on the earth since the beginning of people, there's like billions more planets in the universe than that. So we might be the first human beings, and if we are the first human beings, first what's called sentient beings, then yeah, everything we do technically is galactic because nothing else is happening. But what if we just woke up tomorrow and there was like some ship from the Milky Way Galaxy Federation and just lands and it's like, y'all are backwards as fuck. We've been doing all these kind of things. That would all of a sudden change the perception about the world. And so that's what I'm saying. Like for some of the people, like they truly feel everything's galactic. And to some extent, we are individuals above everything. And everything does get filtered through our individual lived experience of things. But that filter is not the X. That filter is how we define that X. So that's just something that I just wanted to point out. I just keep pointing out because I think it's a core thing that not even just pointing out for the sake of this video, sake of analyzing this, but it's also something I want to drill in my mind. So it's a default way that I kind of approach things. So that's something I just recently, I'm trying to code into my whole NPC chip kind of. But yeah.
All right. So one more
Yes,
paragraph.
I mean, was the last one? Yeah, you read the last one? Yeah, I think it's me.
Yeah, go ahead.
You have anything to say on the other paragraph?
No, it's pretty much just stuff we've been talking about. So.
Okay, so last paragraph. Protecting the election would require an effort of unprecedented scale. As 2020 progressed, it stretched to Congress, Silicon Valley, and the nation's state houses. It drew energy from the summer's racial justice protests. Okay, it drew summer. It drew energy from the summer's racial justice protests, many of whose leaders were a key part of the Liberal Alliance. And eventually, it reached across the aisle into the world of Trump skeptical Republicans, appalled by his attacks on democracy.
So again, to me, it's just more framing, protecting democracy, racial justice. Okay, $10.6 billion. Republicans who are skeptical. It's like, oh, there's a bipartisan effort. When it's no, those are traitor rhinos. It's like it's so obvious the way they're framing this. It's like, I mean, it's pretty much what they've been doing this whole time. So,
And it's just a shorthand here. You see, they say appalled by his attacks on democracy. They've said that a couple of times.
yeah,
But if his attacks on democracy were so appalling, I would think it would be able to say appalled on his attacks on democracy, such as this.
yeah,
His constant efforts to do this, such as this. Just if it's so frequent, if it's so, why don't you actually add that evidence? We're the party of science. We're the people who actually use reality. We're the people who actually like evidence. We don't just come up with these conspiracy theories. We're the people who are solid. So provide some examples. But there is something where time is a company. This person is a writer. She's employed by these people. She understands something of the demographics. There's certain purposes that they have for this. So they kind of understand that it might be a shorthand here where someone says it's attacks on democracy. And it might be people who like something blings up in their mind. Yes, that was an attack on democracy. That was an attack on democracy. But for different people, it's different things. It's how like you go to a church and you ask people, what do you believe that Jesus helped you to stopping? Many people will say different things. You could go to a church and someone would be like, oh, I was applying for this job, and then Jesus helped me get this job. There could be someone else at that church that doesn't know this person applied for that job, that also prayed for that job. That person didn't get it. That person would not say Jesus helped them get that job, but they would fill that in with something else. Oh, I didn't get this job, but then when I got home, my wife said this thing to me that made me realize I love her that much more. So for those people, due to their own lived experience, they'll be able to fill in that whole situation that the devil was fighting against you, and then Jesus helped you do this. So with this kind of situation, they leave it open-ended, where the general premise of Trump bad, him democracy, our democracy, TM good, trademark good, like so that kind of thing is there. So now you fill in the other things, and I think that's also part of that whole way we look at the world. We look in the world in that story, and everybody is that hero. And I think that's why that NPC meme was really hit. It really hit people in a bad way because they're like, we're not an NPC, we're not a background character, we're the main character, we're the protagonist, we're Harry Potter. You know, like there was that kind of thing where it's like they were that person. But we aren't, and no one is. That's the thing. We make those stories about those people. No one is Harry Potter. Like no one is Jesus. There is no Messiah. It's what's called a Messiah complex because there is no Messiah. We're just animals living on this planet, and that's magnificent. Because look at what these animals have been able to do, and look how much more we can possibly do in the future.
Yeah, because I was going to say Messiah means the anointed one. Anointed by who? That's the thing. But it's like everyone, well, like we say, they want to be that hero. And then that NPC thing, people say, oh, this is creepy and dehumanizing. No, it just cuts to close to home that you're not as special as you thought. You're, one of how many people trying to make it. And it's like, if you, especially with our generation, if you go through the whole self-esteem movement, you're told you're special, you're a winner all the time. To get out and realize that's not true, I think is very scary for some people.
Yeah. This whole like Trump skeptical Republicans. You see, and this is the kind of thing where they're talking about, oh, but even this Republican said Trump should just concede. Was that one of those Trump skeptical Republicans that you're talking about? It doesn't really matter. Trump is actually different. Trump wasn't like he's not the whole outsider change guy like the Obama kind of glamour fakeness was. He's actually somebody who was an outsider and was disliked by people on all sides of the political aisle, like from all kinds of places. Libertarians disliked him, just strong kind of ways. Independents disliked him. Like there's people who were against certain things that are associated. Like we're talking about recently about someone like Sam Harris, who on pretty much most of the Democratic type related social political issues, at least social issues, cultural issues, he's somebody who they would consider as alt-right, as horribly male chauvinist type of person as possible. But when it comes to Trump, he was just somebody who was just viscerally against him. And you saw this a lot. Trump did activate certain things about people that were just really, really in an odd way. And I think that's what I'm saying. Like AOC is similar to that because you also see some people being like, I don't think she's personally that impressive of a person. She's happened to achieve some things. She's made use of certain things. I think she's well-meaning, but to me, as I've mentioned before, and I will continue to mention, she is in Trump in the sense where she shows people X. And I am supportive of everybody who shows people X and then lets them come to their terms, rather than people like the Times who say, we're not just showing you X, but X means this. Like I'd rather the people who are providing the actual source. And that's what someone like AOC does, makes you see what X is. And then after that, she comes in and she adds these things. But first of all, she might say X. And that's the same thing with Trump. He shows, okay, this is the X. But the way people are saying AOC is going to like destroy the world, start this going to be these commies jackbooting down the streets kind of thing. Is AOC? She's not about that smoke. She's not that terrific of a person. Just how Trump is not that terrifying of a being for that sense for whatever people thought on the left. At least that's my estimation of it. Again, could be wrong about that, but time will tell. And I'm still watching. Yeah,
well, I think I mentioned last time too, but Helen Pluckrose, like she talks about how the woke hates her because she wrote cynical theories, and she's left leaning. Like she went to feminist marches when she was little. She told people they should vote for Biden even though she's not American. But it's like, but because she's not a pure wokey, they come after her, and it's like I'm looking at her and I'm like, no, she's left on most things.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So that's been an hour for this. So we will break off here for this part.
Sure.
And look at this. Actually, this is a lengthy article.
Yeah.
I mean, I read this stuff. If it was a straight thing, but we're doing this because we're also keeping in mind that these are some things to do with the people who are watching. We're really thankful for whoever's been watching this. The first video came out and got some really good shows on that, and we hope to have this going. And just looking for your actual input. Let us know what you think about this, how you like this whole platform. Like Stephen and I, this is stuff that we could be talking about anyway. Like when this came out, it's like, okay, I'm going to read this article anyway. With some of these things, I'll normally read them on my own, have different readings, things like that. I'm probably going to try to get in the reading of Repressive Tolerance in before we get to the next series, as we're filling this one in. But we thought like, okay, let's have this conversation. Because for me, being online isn't just a simple thing of, let me just go online and read what other people have said about things, or let other people tell me what I should think about things. It's about being able to go online and have conversations, witness people having conversations. I'm talking to some friends of getting on like there's that platform called, I think, Clubhouse, where you get on, you just sign into a room and people are talking about things and you just sit and watch, or you participate, or you just dip out. Like that's kind of the thing where I'm like, that's the future. That's what the world is coming, sharing these ideas. Agreed. And I've gained so much from having conversations with people that I thought, hey, let's just share these conversations.
Sure.
And I'll try to reach out to more people and from different political spectrums, talking about different topics and this kind of platform, this kind of thing. And with that is also with you out there who are watching this. Thanks so much for watching it. When I actually get into the conversation, I kind of forget that this is actually going to be out there. I try to keep that in mind a bit, but just fall into the actual conversation. But I think Stephen will attest, and I will attest at least with Stephen, when we have these conversations not being recorded, we talk about the same stuff in the same kind of way. Yeah. So it's not like it really changes because we're on this platform. But no. We also understand that we're on a platform. That's why we decided with some of our things, instead of just a 3-hour-long conversations that we would have in person when we were hanging out or just online. So, okay, we're going to do clips because we understand there's actually some things to get more people involved in it. And then when you are involved in it, you might give us more ideas and thoughts and input of things that we haven't seen. And that's how the world gets better. That's how we all flourish together. So
definitely.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it.
Yep, that's it for me too.
That was securing the vote is the next part. So securing the vote, the disinformation defense, spreading the word. I think the disinformation defense and spreading the word, those are like, they seem to be 4 paragraphs each, so those will probably be done together. Then people power and strange bedfellows will probably be done together. Showing up and standing down, that might be done with that one. Then the 5-step to victory, and that leads to the last part, now how close we came. Yeah, so I think there's going to be at least 3 more parts of this. This is the 3rd part we recorded. The first part we recorded today of The Architect, I shall publish that. And with this one, I'm not going to go like daily. Once it's published and post-produced, I'll just put it up. But hopefully we'll have all of this done by Wednesday, you think?
Yeah, it should be good, sure.
You down to record tomorrow?
Yeah, should
Okay, so we'll record the next parts tomorrow and maybe even faster than that, and we'll have them out. But thanks very much. Thanks, Stephen. Anything else?
Thank you. That's it. It's all for me.
Okay. Goodbye, people.
Bye, everyone.